It's that time of year again, as 2020 has been such a dumpster fire of a year. This Christmas special comes with extra beer. Hello fellow Heroes of the Blue, and welcome to my channel, and also welcome to another episode of Heavy Contrast, a series where I try to paint one miniature to the highest standard possible using just contrast paints and highlights. And for this Christmas special episode, I'm going to paint the limited edition Christmas miniature from Games Workshop. And for this year is Jakkob Bugmansson. So, let's get cracking. As you can see, we are starting from a base coat of Korax white spray on his body, but I actually base coated his head and his keg of beer with Wraithbone spray, just because I want a warm undercoat for the wood and for the flesh and the beard. I'm going to start painting his red cloth, and for this I'm going to use Flesh Tearers Red. I'm trying to be as neat as possible, especially around the gloves, because those will be white. And as usual, I'm going to apply a layer, absorb any excess over those details, and then move on into other areas. With the Flesh Tearers Red still drying, but dry enough that I can apply my first layer to the black leather details, I'm going to do so, and for that I'm going to use a Space Wolf's Grey. This of course will be painted black later on, but this layer will act as a first kind of pre-shading, giving me a bit of depth, and also a bit of a cold tint, which I really like, especially considering how much red this mini will have once I'm done with it. I'm now going to start base coating all the red metallic armor, and for this I'm going to use Retributor armor. So everything that you want to be red metallic, I will paint with this. I have all the armor that I wish to be red base coated with Retributor armor, and before applying all my red contrast, I'm going to shade it and highlight it, and I'm going to start shading it by using Fire Slayer Flesh. What I will do is first of all do a recess shade in all our armor. Be sure to pick up all the rivets and panel lines. And on top of that, I'm also going to do a volumetric shading, and for this what I will do is take Fire Slayer Flesh. I'm going to apply it where I want the shadows to go, clean my brush and feather it out into the rest of the armor. Example, back here I'm going to apply shade, cleaning, just like that. Our shading with Fire Slayer Flesh is now done, and you can clearly see how much definition that has made, and especially here in the back color you can see how I made bands of shade. This is still drying and light in a TMM fashion because I really like it. And I'm going to start highlighting it now, and for this I'm going to start with a mix of 1 part Retributor armor and 1 part Stormhold Silver. I will do with this is an edge highlight, and I will also thin this down and apply a highlight there in those bits. You can see how thin that is there. You really want to make these highlights as bold as you can make them. As this will be covered with contrast paints, we need to create as much contrast as we can now. Our highlight with the 50-50 mix of Stormhold Silver and Retributor Armor is now done, and you can see how heavy I went with my highlights. And for the final highlight, before we apply the contrast, I'm going to take Stormhold Silver and just going to do the final highlight. So just the same thing I did before. If you went a bit too heavy, you can always feather it out if you are quick, like I just did there. Foliage highlight in there. And the preferred method for me for this volumetric highlight is just apply like a heavy glaze or a glaze. Again, contrast will cover this pretty much, so you don't really need to be that clean. Our shading and highlighting of the red armor is now finished, and I'm going to apply all my contrast over it. This will be a mix of 1 part Flesh Tearers Red, 1 part Blood Angels Red, and 1 part Contrast Medium. I'm going to just apply this over all my highlighting. You don't want this to be too thick, so I'm going to apply it to one section, go in and absorb any excess. Our layer of red contrast is now almost dry, and I'm going to start highlighting all the red armor again, just to reinforce anything that the contrast may have eliminated more than what I wish to. And for this I'm going to use Canoptech Alloy, and I'm just going to basically pick up the most extreme edges with this. This is quite thin, as you can see there. We really want a thin consistency. I still have part of the armor to highlight, but I want to show you the final highlight before I get on going. This will be, again, a Stormhold Silver, and I'm just going to do just the final extreme highlight. These are just small dots. Yeah, picking up corners, very small dots. And now to finish off the red armor once and for all, I'm going to make a glaze using the same mix, 1 part red Flesh Tearers Red, 1 part Blood Angels Red, mixing it with a lot of contrast medium, so we have this sort of thin consistency. You almost can't tell it's there, but it will be effective. And I'm going to glaze with this all the armor. this should be really thin. You don't let this pull. This is not what we are after here. It's just a way to unify everything, bring back a bit of the red intensity, but again, it's more a matter of unifying all the highlights that we just did. With our metallic red armor finally done, I'm going to move into the red cloth, and the first highlight will be Evilson Scarlet. I'm just basically going to do a thick edge highlight with Evilson Scarlet. Yes, very simple. Pick up all the edges on the folds of the cloth. If there are some areas that you feel have pulled too much, you can also glaze a bit of this over them, for example here. And now for my second highlight on the red cloth, I'm going to use Wild Rider Red, and I'm going to do the exact same edge highlight, only this time I'm going to make it thin. So basically doing the same highlight I did with Evilson Scarlet. That highlight of Wild Rider Red now done, I'm going to move into Fire Dragon Bright, and I'm just going to do the exact same highlight, but I will take a bit less space. Just like that, concentrating this into the most exposed corners and edges of each fold, or here where two folds meet each other. And now for the final highlight on the red cloth, I'm going to use Lugganath Orange, and I will just do very small dots of Lugganath Orange in the most prominent details. Just like that, super small. Just the final touch. With all the red details finished, I'm going to start painting the black boots, and for this I'm going to base coat all the black metallic areas using Iron Warriors. In the same way I did with the red armor, I'm going to highlight all the black metallic areas before applying contrast, and for this I'm going to start with Iron Hand Steel. I'm just basically going to pick the edges, you know, that sort of stuff. Our highlight with Iron Hand Steel is now done. I'm going to move into the final highlight before applying contrast, and this is again a Stormhold Silver, of course, and I'm just going to do an edge highlight, just taking less space, same as we did with the red armor. With the metallic details on the boots now highlighted, I'm going to apply black Templar over all of the boots. This of course includes all the metallic details, but also the leather bits. Our layer of black Templar is almost dry, and you can see that we are basically already there. We just need to reinforce all the highlights that the contrast paints killed. For this I'm going back to Stormhost Silver, and I'm going to thin it down to kind of this consistency. You can see there's a bit transparent, and just going to reinforce all my highlights. Now, to finish off the black boots, I'm going to apply a glaze using black Templar and contrast medium as I did with the red. You can see how super thin it is. We just want to basically unify everything, all the shines, because of course metallic paints shine a lot, but contrast paints don't shine as much, so this will help tone everything down and unify everything into a very cohesive thing. Now to paint the black leather details, I'm going to take Thunderhawk Blue and I'm going to edge highlight them. So just very small edge highlight there. There really isn't much to highlight at all, it's just a very small area. For the next step in the black leather, I'm going to take Fenrisian Grey, and I'm going to do basically the same edge highlight, just taking less space. And finally, to finish off all the leather, I'm going to take Ulthuan Grey, and I'm going to do a very small dot of this. There. What I try to do is following the TMM highlighted did on the black, so it looks like it's shining a bit. With all those details now painted, and you can see that now that I have painted everything that is in the back that could interfere with my axe, I also painted the axe handle in the same way I painted the back of the boots. And I also painted in the same way this little cable here. And now it's time to paint our white details and have them cleaned up using Corax White. And our first step will be to do a layer of Apothecary White over all those details. With the layer of Apothecary White now dry, I'm going to add a bit more shading into the white, and I will do that with the recessed shade of Rift Charger Grey. I'm just taking the Rift Charger Grey, putting it into all the nooks and crannies, all the lines, like that. It really adds quite a bit of depth. And finally, for the white details, I'm going to do an edge highlight using pure white. With all the white details now painted, I'm going to base coat all my steel metallic parts, and for this I'm going to use iron hand steel. So I'm just going to pick up everything that I want to be steel with this. Pretty simple. With all my steel details now base coated, I'm going to shade them using Griff Charger Grey. For the general things like the Mac here and stuff like that, I'm just going to do an overall layer of this. Just like that. Absorb as always any excess. For example, this here. If it's pulled too much or it goes out of control like here, just go back with the brush and absorb any excess. But here on the blade, I'm going to do a kind of TMM effect. I'm going to apply the Griff Charger Grey here on the down part. If the transition is a bit rough, you can always clean your brush and smooth it out, just like that. I will let that layer dry and I will apply another one. And here I'm going to do the same, but on the upper sections. All my shading with Griff Charger Grey is now done, and you can see how much of an impact this has, how dramatic I made TMM effect on the axe. You can see I also went and added another round of shading, just a richer shade over all the metallic details, and now I'm going to base coat all the gold details, and for this I'm going to use Retributor Armor, and I will just pick things like the dwarf symbol here, of course all the decoration here on the axe. With all the gold base coated, I'm now going to shade it using Guilliman Flesh. I'm just going to apply a layer of Guilliman Flesh over all the gold details. Also with Guilliman Flesh, I'm going to apply a layer over all of his flesh. I'm trying to not put this on his beard because I want the wraith bone there, and it's a bit of pain to clean up, but if it gets there, don't worry too much. My layer of Guilliman Flesh is now dry. I'm going to take Fire's layer flesh, and I'm just going to use this to define better some of the lines. For example, you can see the lines here on his axe are not well defined. They are a bit not here, not there. So I'm just going to take some Fire's layer flesh and run it along the lines just to make clear where the separation is. Define a bit better the shape. And as I did before, I'm also going to take Fire's layer flesh and deepen the shadows on the face as well. Basically running it inside the eye sockets, the wrinkles, and defining like the edges of the face with this. With all the shading done, it's now time to start highlighting all the metal details, and for this I'm going to start with the gold, and I'm going to use a 1-to-1 mix of Retributor Armor and Stronghold Silver, and I'm just going to basically just edge highlight the gold details. A bit of edge highlighting, a bit of layering here and there, picking up, basically defining the shapes better. And once that highlight is done, excuse me if I don't do it just for the sake of being quicker making the video, I'm going to take Stone Hot Silver and do the final highlight. In the gold it will be just small dots in the corners, just the final extra contrast, just like that. And for the steel details I'm going to do a full edge highlight, using the edge of the brush when I can. And if I can't, I will just very carefully apply this. My first step now will be to shade his beard using Apothecary White. I want a kind of warm white to contrast with the cold white we did on his clothes. While the Apothecary White on the beard dries, I can start highlighting his flesh. For this I'm going to use Flate 1 Flesh, and just going to pick up the most prominent parts of his face with this. He has a very large and easy face to work with, so this shouldn't be any problem. I'm concentrating my highlights towards the upper sides, like here on the cheeks, and picking the edges of his wounds here. And here on the top of his head, I'm just going to do a spot highlight. This is how thin my paint is. I'm just going to place this like so, moving my brush towards the center of his head. If I feel some of the edges are not clean enough, I can always further them out a little bit. For a second highlight on the flesh, I'm going to use Palette Witch Flesh. And for this I'm just going to pick the most prominent details, like the side of the nostrils, tip of the nose, here. Again, picking just the upper sides. And now I'm going to do another highlight on the face. This will be pure white, and I will be very sparing with this. As you can see, I'm just making very small dots of light, little dots, just to emphasize the very most prominent features. Also, now that I have white on my palette, I'm going to highlight the beard. All our skin is now mostly highlighted and shaded, but it's looking a bit, you know, sterile. So I'm going to add a bit of life into it using Flesh Cirrus Red thinned down with the Lamia Medium. You can see how thin that is there, and I'm going to glaze this over all the details that will have some blood flowing through them, like for example his nose, because you know, he surely likes a bit of a drink. I'm picking up his cheeks too. He's a happy little dwarf. I'm going to apply a little bit here on this side of the head. And I'm going to make a bit of thicker mix You can see it there. And I'm going to glaze this over his lower lip. Just like that. If some of this goes over his beard, like I have here and here, I will let that dry. And once it's dry, I will just paint over with white. My first layer is now dry. I'm going to apply a second one over the nose. And the cheeks. I did another glaze over his cheeks and a couple more over his nose, but that glaze with the red has dulled down some of the highlights, so I'm going back to palette Witch Flesh and I'm going to pick a dot here on his lower lip, and here on the nose. I'm just going to do small highlight on the nostrils here. I'm going to highlight very small highlight there, and also here of course on the cheeks. Now going back to palette Witch Flesh, I'm going to actually paint his eyeball. This one is closed and you cannot see them, so I'm not going to paint it, but this is. Just take palette Witch Flesh and very carefully paint over the raised eyeball there. Now I'm way zoomed in so you can see this well. I'm going to paint the pupil. Again, I'm taking a bit of black and I'm just going to do a dot with this black. In the center of the eye. And now for the very last final detail on his eye, I'm going to paint a very small white reflection in the black parts. Just like that.
Hey, yo, I feel like talking my shit. 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 Ay, I got a bitch in a weird. Ay, niggas be talking that shit. Ay.
With all those details painted, I just glued his backpack on and I painted the red wood exactly the same as I did his red cloth, and you can trace all these recipes to the rest of the model very easily. There is a couple of details I have left to paint. I'm going to start with the dials here, and the first step will be to clean them up using Corax White. Just very carefully, I'm going to paint them with Corax White. Now I'm going to take Flesh Tear's Red and I'm going to drop it in some very small indentations that are inside each dial. For example, here it's a line right there, but for others like this one, it's a very small triangle. And to finish up the dials, I'm going to take Black Templar and I'm going to paint the small indicators. With all the tiles done, I'm going to paint the beer froth here, and I'm going to take Agaro's Dunes and thin it down to this sort of super thin consistency. And I'm going to apply this as a glaze or a wash over here. Now to finish off the beer froth, I'm going to take pure white and I'm just going to do a very quick highlight here. Don't think too much, I'm basically a bit of stippling. And with all that done, there is just one detail left to paint, and it's of course the coolest one. That's where I left it for the last step, and I'm going to start with the Garros dunes, and I'm going to basically sketch out the shape of the liquid inside of his backpack. With that done, I'm going to take Black Templar and I'm going to start painting the hollow part. And for this, I'm going to start from the top and move my brush towards the lower side. Let's do another layer. I'm trying to deposit more of this paint towards this side. And I'm going to take a Garros Dunes and do the same on here, but I'm going to try and leave more paint in this area here. With this first sketch now dry, I'm going to take Corax White and I'm going to define all the shapes a bit better. For example, this has froth from here. By the way, I'm just trying to copy as close as possible the box art. So this has shape like this, and here it has another shape like this. There you go. Now I'm going to take back again a Garros Dunes, and I'm just going to do a very thin line just below this line of Corax White we did. And I also going to do another layer here to emphasize these shadows. I'm moving it like that. And of course I also going to reinforce the shadows on this side. Now I'm going to take Black Templar and I'm going to define better the shape here, because I think it's a bit big. So I'm just dotting Black Templar around the edge until I'm happy with the shape. That looks much better to me. And now I'm going to thin the Black Templar into a sort of thin glaze like this, and I'm just going to glaze it into this side. And now I'm going back to Corax White. As you can see, this is a back and forth process. This is not A, B and C. This is just like fixing it as you go, basically. I'm defining the shapes more. Now I'm going to add even more shadows here, so I'm taking again the Garros Dunes. And I'm just going to drop this here. Clean my brush as I did before. And feather this out into the rest of the liquid. I'm pretty happy with the beer here, but I'm not really happy with the hollow part. It doesn't really look like the art box. So I'm going to take Fire Slayer Flesh and I'm just going to glaze it here over the top to give it a brown tinge that fits very well. Oh yeah, that immediately looks much better to me. I really like how this is looking now, but it needs some highlights. And I'm going to start with Avalon Sunset, which I'm thinning down. No, that's a bit too thick. Yeah, much better. And I'm going to apply a highlight here on this side of the liquid. Just like that. And now I'm going to take Ethereal Yellow, and you can see the consistency. And I'm just going to apply a slight highlight there. And I'm also going to do a small random dots of this. Now I'm going to take pure white and I'm going to highlight the froth of the beer. Let's basically picking these edges here. And like that. And again, I'm just going to do some random dots of this. Now I'm fairly happy with how this looks, so I'm just going to do the light reflection on the glass. And for this I'm going to take Jakkob Bugmansson, and I'm going to have it fairly thin. You can see, I'm going to add a bit more there, it was too thin. You can see it there, that is perfect. And very carefully I'm just going to draw a circle with this. Very slowly building this up. And I'm also going to do a line like this. And now for the final highlight on the glass, I'm just going to take pure white. And I'm just going to drop this pure white, really thin line there. I'm going to emphasize this line there. Especially concentrated towards the white details, like there, and a little bit there. And with that last step done, our model is finished, and I really hope you enjoyed this 2020 Heavy Contrast Christmas special. So guys, I'll see you in the next one. Bye! Do you like my videos and want to help me make them? Well, there are several ways you can do that. You can follow me on social media. You have the links to all my social media in the description below. You can also check all my affiliate links in the pinned comment of this video. Use those links in your next hobby purchase and help me without any additional cost to you. I also have merch that you can see just below this video or in the shop tab of my channel. But most importantly, there is Patreon and channel members. You have the link to my Patreon in the description below and in the pinned comment of the video, or if you prefer, you can just click the join button below this video. Patreon and channel members help me do all the cool projects that I want to make and help me improve the quality of my videos. Don't be afraid, no content will ever be hidden behind a paywall, but it's a nice way to help me and you will get something back for generosity. Said guys, thank you very much for watching. And a special thank you to Daniel Figueiredo, Heather Amster, Lawrence Sigismondi, Ben Morin, Victor Dome, Michael Boye, Christophe Moret, Joshua Bohannon, Ryan Mann, Beldrain, Patrick Katsisis, Javi Mota, Kevin Sulas, Kieran Umurthai, Leonard Lindemann, Dr. V, G-Force, Eldrick Edge, Asha Park, Kitty Butler, Josh Simpson, Dominic Trevizo, Richard Kierkowski, Brian Sillinger, Mark Jarvis, Garrett Smith, Vilkas War, Matteo De Rienzo, Arundel, Natius Maximus, Samuel, Supernerd, Iquitas, Chris Fybe, Darcy Farrar, and Kevin Mian for being the coolest persons in the planet. Be like these fine folks, join my Patreon and take control.